Hello and welcome to the Kamla Show. We bring you interviews and conversations with technologists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers and others from in and around the San Francisco Bay Area. My guests today are director Sarah Gavor and Abi Morgan. Gavron is the director of the 2015 British historical period drama called Suffragette, and Morgan wrote the screenplay. The film takes you back nearly 100 years ago to 1912 and 1913 when women in Britain fought for their right to vote. The film stars Carey Mulligan, Helena Bonham Carter, Meryl Streep, Brendan Gleeson and Anne-Marie Duff. I have with me Abi Morgan and Sarah Gavor. Welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
So, Abi, you wrote the screenplay for the film Suffragette. And I understand that you always embed a dialogue from your previous production into whatever your new production is. Did you do that in this movie?
Well, you know what? It's really funny because I always do. And I remember the famous one was always You're Dripping, which went through 3 scripts at some point where somebody was carrying a bag with tomatoes and then someone's coming out of a shower. So, but in this one, I have a feeling that actually Meryl's line, Never Surrender, was originally in Iron Lady, funny enough. And I think we ended up cutting it. So I think that's why I thought, oh, great, it's actually in one of her quotes. I think that's where it is in the movie.
This is your second production. The two of you, your first one was Monica Ali's Brick Lane.
Yes, it's been great to reunite with Abi and work together because we've got such a shorthand, and it's a very useful collaboration because we work together so well.
It's taken you, 10 years to make this film?
Well, I'd been thinking about it for 10 years and we worked together for 6 years because there was such a body of research and there were so many different ways you could have gone that it took a while to find that route in.
So when you started writing, you were writing from a perspective of an upper middle class woman or a middle class woman, and then you decided that there was something wrong in the way you were writing. How did the idea strike you that you had to take a sharp right turn and focus on a working class woman?
I think when we brought the character of Maud into the house, who was the house that Alice Romola Garai's character was meant to live in, and I realised that the world of the house and the kind of domestic servants and the lady upstairs felt very familiar. And one of the desires when we started to work on this film was finding this incredible lives of these working class women. And I think Sarah and I both realised no one was going to do a film about these women. These were the voiceless, and we had an opportunity to give them voice. So many of them were illiterate, so they weren't going to write their memoirs. They didn't, they weren't published in the Suffragette. They tended to be the tiny bits of conversation that we would catch in an interview in the police records, which were declassified in 2003, or they would be a tiny quote in the testimonials of one of the women talking about what working conditions were like. And these felt very relevant women and ordinary women, and it was about saying, I think, ordinary women changed the face of history, not necessarily exceptional ones.
Did I hear you say it was only in 2003 the files were after 100 odd years?
Yeah, I mean, that was the extraordinary thing. It seems to be legally they don't declassify them until a certain period of time. And what was very exposing about that was that you saw the level of intimidation and surveillance, and effectively through force feeding the torture of these women as a means to break down and undermine and try and disband this extraordinary movement of women. So yeah, they were very shocking, I think, to both of us, because again, that felt very 21st century.
You had mentioned, Sarah, in another interview that you had read the sanitized version of the suffragette movement and you had not heard about these working class women with no education having played such a, should I say, a strong role.
That's right. I mean, I think the story is just not widely known. It's been marginalised, by the historians partly, and it's not on the school curriculum. And we all have this Mary Poppins view of the world of the suffragettes. And, what was interesting was once we delved into this research was finding the true story of these women who went so far, who lost so much and faced such brutality.
That is interesting because in England you have the socialist historians like Eric Hobsbawm and others who have written, there's a lot of history that's been written from the socio-economic perspective. How is it that the suffragette movement aspect with the working class women was not covered in should I say, alternate history books?
Yeah, I mean, Jill Littleton has written an amazing book about working women. Krista Cowman has written a book about working women. So they are there, but, you know, in the whole body of history, if you know, generally their stories get lost. And it's been those academics who have brought them to the fore, which has been great. And that's partly helped us find those stories. But they're just, you know, it's partly that they're not, you know, women's history is just not treated in the way it should be.
How ironic do you think it was that you had Helena Bonham Carter play a role in this when her grandmother played a very different role in the movement?
Yes, and her great-grandfather was Herbert Asquith, the Prime Minister at the time, who was the chief antagonist of the suffragettes. And her grandmother, Violet, was also opposed to women's votes, partly because she was the eldest child of Herbert Asquith and, you know, saw it from his perspective. But, yeah, it was extraordinary that she was there revisiting her own history from such a different perspective.
Did you ever get to talk to her about the suffragette movement and the role that her ancestors played?
Yes, absolutely. And she went up to Helen Pankhurst, who was the great-granddaughter of Emmeline Pankhurst, who was visiting the set and consulting and helping us out. And she said, I'm sorry, you know, I want to understand why it happened in the way it did. And, you know, he was known as a liberal prime minister and he achieved some good. But in that respect, when it came to women, he was really intransigent.
You wrote some parts for men, but I think I read again somewhere that there's been criticism that there aren't too many men in this film. Do you think that's a fair criticism, or do you think, or did you have a problem getting men?
Did you say there were too many men in this? No, not enough men. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in many ways, you know, what's extraordinary is that the men that we have got in this movie, you know, I'd worked with Ben Whishaw before, so I knew what a fine and complex actor he was. And, you know, one of the challenges with this film is that the men are supporting, and traditionally that has been the woman's role in film. And so it was nice to readdress that balance. But actually all the actors that we've been, you know, who joined us, including Brendan Gleeson and Finbar Lynch and Sam West, they were terrific because they understood how vital their roles were. And, you know, it was very important to us that not only did we show the women, but we showed the men that supported them, the men that interrogated them and intimidated them, the men who were in conflict with them, and the men who worked really hard to undermine them and destroy them. So all the time we were trying to create as complex a group as possible. And yeah, it was difficult to cast at first, but actually, because I think there was an expectation, there's always an expectation that if men come on screen, they should have more to do. But, you know, I think what we're very keen to do is do these big ensemble pieces where, yes, you know, you have women at the forefront, but I think we were just very unfortunate with the men we got. We were really lucky.
How did you get Brendan Gleeson?
Well, I mean, Brendan was an actor that I've just always admired because he's so truthful. And one of the ideas of this film that we had very stripped down, authentic feel to the whole project, and we wanted actors who could bring that accuracy and truthfulness to their performances. And Brendan is an obvious candidate, and he's also got such gravitas and complexity and subtlety, and he we sent it to him and he responded very quickly, and then he was also very engaged in just the whole project. In fact, you know, he couldn't have been more supportive of the whole idea of the film.
Did I read right in Brendan Gleeson's eyes? He was kind of sympathetic to Carey, but yet because of the circumstances and because of the famous British bureaucracy where you have to toe the line, he had to do what he had to do. But did he give her a little leeway here and there?
I mean, we based Brendan Gleeson's character on a composite of two detectives at the time, and what was very important to us was to try and expose a man who absolutely upheld the law, who had never questioned the law to that point, but was intelligent enough to see that the passion of these women and how difficult their lives were, and from that sober standpoint is slowly drawn into understanding more and more that a life is about to be lost, and also to a certain degree therefore questioning that law. And so I think Brendan does that wonderful performance that's always playing under the line, and you can constantly see that he's a man who is desperately trying to save Maud, and the shock at the end is he does save Maud to a certain degree in terms of she is not the one who throws herself under the horse, but you could feel that she could be. So actually it was always about creating not only the kind of women but the men who drove them and stood behind them. And Brendan is a wonderful he can somehow seem to carry, you know, both sides of the conflict.
I'm sure you've been asked this question many times. Why Meryl Streep? And I was thinking, were you doffing your hat at Emily Pankhurst and what she did when she came to America, participating or at least looking at the civil, at the movement to free the slaves? That aspect of Pankhurst is something that not many people know, that she came to America. Her daughter came to America, actually lived in California, and I think she's buried somewhere in Los Angeles. So I'm wondering, did I read too much into you casting Meryl Streep as Emily Pankhurst?
Well, we wanted an icon to play an icon. We wanted this role of Emily Pankhurst, who comes in this one sequence of the film, to be carried by someone who could convey the enormous charisma of this leader. And this woman that every woman would follow, had so many acolytes. And so we thought about who that could be. And, Meryl Streep is one of our greatest actors, and she's also a great advocate for women's rights. She's also so versatile. She can play a part from any country, and so she felt like a really exciting proposition, and we Carey Mulligan suggested her, and we approached her, and she said yes, and we couldn't have been happier.
And here I thought you were doffing your hat at the American side.
Well, yeah, you could say that, and it's also genuinely helpful in reaching a broader audience, having Meryl.
So what do you think this film has done for voter turnout? Do you think it's going to do anything? Because it's been 100 years, women have now a right to vote, and yet the voter turnout all over the world, especially in developed countries, say America and the UK and elsewhere, is pretty low, and women don't vote. Do you think you want to reignite a debate on what women went through and how they're not paying attention to what has been achieved?
Well, I mean, I definitely think, you've kind of answered the question in terms of, it is the thing that was inspiring to us, and I think that you want that to radiate out to an audience, is that how hard fought this war was, and I do refer to it as a war because it kind of was, and that how hard it was to win that vote, and that, we do live in an age now that maybe has become disillusioned with the power of the vote and how important it is to use that vote. But I think, again, it was also the bigger narrative, which is, we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And this film is trying to inspire and evoke the important message that we need equality for all women across the world, and in fact all people across the world. And so we hope that that's the kind of war cry that it leaves, which is let's keep fighting, let's keep trying, let's keep demanding more, not only for ourselves but ourselves in the industry, in every area of industry, and let's get those numbers up, because we know that in every area of industry women are not, it's not comparable. It seems to be this magic 17% across the board in terms of women in business and women in law and women within the judicial and academic system. So it's just about upping those numbers, and we hope this film is part of the discourse that will help do that.
I've been encouraged because the film has opened in the UK, the amount of tweets of young women saying, gosh, if I ever thought I wouldn't use my vote, now I will, having seen this and been reminded of how hard these women fought and how important it is to be represented. I mean, one of the things I took from this research was just how the lives of these women were dramatically changed once they got the vote, and that there started to be legislation that gave them parental rights, that allowed them to sit on juries, that allowed them to become solicitors, that allowed them to have money, their own money. So it's so important to stand up and be counted.
My last question is it ironic when the suffragette movement took place, because you had just finished a 60-year reign under Queen Victoria, and you would have thought that under the Victorian age you would have had some rights for women.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. You come when you, as I said, you realize how far you've come, but how far you still have to go. And when a woman in Saudi Arabia can now register to vote, but she still needs a man to drive her there, then we know we still have a way to go. So absolutely, I think it's probably fascinating, but actually, it's just a mark that we've had a long reign of our own queen, and actually, we still have some more rights to readdress and get right.
Yes, and Queen Victoria wasn't that pro women getting the vote. I mean, I think, she operated in such a different universe.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
You can listen to this and other interviews on our website, kamlashow.com, KAMLASHOW.com. And you can catch our TV interviews on our YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter. My handle is @Kamla. And if you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, please feel free to send an email to us. And as always, thank you for tuning in.